Hi, this is Ronika Wahi. I'm back with another interview. This time it's with best-selling author Avanti Centrae. She has always wanted to be a writer, but she worked for years in the Silicon Valley, and then she finally ventured onto fulfilling her long-deferred dream when she wrote her first book. And right from her first book, she's tasted a great success, and she's won accolades, she's won awards, and now she's soon going to release her latest, Cleopatra's Vendetta. It's going to be out on 15th November of this year, and it's already generating a lot of interest among fellow writers and book reviewers, and it's already won the Chanticleer International Book Award for Global Thriller. So thank you so much, Avanti, for taking out the time for this interview. It's amazing having you on this interview. So thank you so much. And okay, so let's start asking you questions about your journey. So first of all, what I'd like to know from you is that you took this practical decision to work in IT, right? But and your family was also suggesting the same. Then you worked there for years. So how did you finally decide to give in to this dream that you'd had since you were young?
Well, first, Veronica, let me say thank you for hosting this show. I'm just thrilled to be here, and I believe everybody's got a journey and a dream inside them. And mine started when I was quite young, as you mentioned. I learned to read at a very young age, about the time that my mom was teaching me to tie my shoes. I was learning to read and was just fascinated by the written word from the get-go, and knew that I always wanted to be an author. And as I grew older, I read everything in the library, and studied writing and did well in school in writing. But my parents discouraged it as a career path, and perhaps for good reason, because it is very difficult to make money as a writer. And so they encouraged me to pursue a more practical career path, as you note. So I went to school at Purdue University and studied information technology, and then held a series of jobs, including that as an executive for Hewlett Packard in Silicon Valley, and eventually. Kind of along the way, there were different points at which I thought about writing, and I actually wrote a screenplay that never sold. I wrote some poems that were pretty silly, and finally, and meanwhile, I was studying story structure, and I was studying plotting, and I was studying personalities, which really play into a great book, right? You've got to have good characters and good personalities. So although it appears as though, I just one day wrote a book, there was a lot going on, behind the scenes to prepare me so that when I turned 50 and decided that, the clock is ticking on my life, that I better get with the program if I wanted to produce anything meaningful, before I take the long sleep. I decided I better get going. And then it took me about a year to outline the first book, and then about another year to write it, and then a couple of years to get it published. So it's a very long journey. So it's kind of nice to be on the other side of that, looking back, and and now being able to write novel after novel.
Right. So as you mentioned, there was a lot of background work that you did, and then of course you achieved success with your first book, and then you had a series of successes, right? And this latest book is also generating, like I mentioned, a lot of interest already. So uh, in this journey that you've had in these last few years, it's obviously been very wonderful for you as a writer. But what are some one or two key milestones or moments that you consider as the most significant on this journey, things that are the most special to you on this beautiful journey that you've had?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think that probably the most significant thing happened back when I was still querying agents. And actually, I had found an agent, but she was querying publishers. And so for anybody who doesn't know how that process works, first you write a query letter and you send it to agent after agent after agent after agent, and then finally one of them says, yes, I will represent your work. And then that agent turns around and sends a very similar letter to publishers, publisher 1, 2, 3, 4. So we were in that, long and painful process. I had entered my first book, which was called VanOps, The Lost Power. I had entered it into a contest, the Chanticleer contest. It's an international contest, and it has a lot of different categories, including thriller, suspense, mystery, and I had been notified along the way that my book had it shortlisted, and I was like, oh, that's kind of exciting. I'm in the running, so I made it out of the slush pile, and then it long listed, and then it was a finalist. And so I went to the conference, which was held up in Bellingham, Washington, a couple hours from Seattle. And I'm sitting in this large room. Everyone had just had dinner. There's people there from all over the world who have come for the conference and for this award ceremony on Saturday night. And they have people up on stage who are reading the categories and everything. And my category was toward the end. And so I'm sitting there and I am just on complete pins and needles. My stomach is upset, it's gurgling. It was a good dinner, but I hardly tasted it because I'm just so nervous. And Anne Charles was reading she was the winner from the year before. And so she's reading the names of the winners, and The Lost Power won. It won a first place, and then it went on to win first in the whole category. So they've got first place, and then they've got like an entire genre, and so it won an entire genre, and I was just completely over the moon. I turned to my partner and I said, "This is a complete game changer." When you win that first award, because now you're an award-winning author, and when people are trying to decide if they want to read a new author, or if other authors are trying to decide if they want to spend the time to blurb your book or even read it, right? Having that sort of independent validation that, yeah, this is a good book. And sure, not everybody's going to love everything, but to know that this panel of independent judges loved my work, I think that was the biggest game changer in my entire career, because it allowed me to then get blurbs from Anne Charles, James Rollins, Steve Barry, Robin Bursell, who co-wrote with Clive Cussler, and it was all about that award, I think.
Right. How wonderful. But then, I think although that gave you a really good start, it also puts a lot of pressure on the writer, right? When they're coming up with their new work, that I have to outdo the first one, or at least be as good as that one, right? So have you felt that pressure going forward?
A little bit, because this book that we're going to talk about today, Cleopatra's Vendetta, it feels so special to me in terms of how it came about, and the characters and the story, and how the intrigue, history, science, and mystery all came together. That I've had a little bit of that. Wow, that was so good. How am I going to do better than that one? So there is a little bit of that, because I feel like it came out really well. Right. But what I have to do is just think about the next one, and start getting into that one, and then eventually I fall in love with the next one, and I think the one I'm working on is just the cat's meow. So.
Right. So, okay. So now, before we start talking about Cleopatra's Vendetta, I'd like to talk a little about Cleopatra herself, right? So, Cleopatra, we know now that she was a very intelligent and smart woman. She was knowledgeable. She was politically very powerful, and she did have a really good political presence. She was a polyglot as well. But over the centuries, the main focus has been on her relationships with her Roman lovers, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. And even today, though we know that there's this version of her which is very smart, people are still continuing to focus on the narrative that's not complementary to her. So, what do you think is the reason for the continuing focus on this uncomplimentary narrative?
So in a way, the whole book is about that.
Right.
And I think a couple of things that we can say without having a lot of spoilers is that the man who defeated her and basically caused her to kill herself, her arch enemy Octavian, he had in real life 44 years to make her look bad. And as I think is often common, when you as a new ruler are trying to get control of your kingdom, and I think we even see this in corporate America. So maybe listeners can relate. I don't know if they've ever had a new boss come in, and next thing you know, everything that the old boss did was bad, right? And I have all these new ideas. Right? You've seen this, I can tell. So I think it was probably the same way back in 30 BC. Octavian, he won the war, and so he wanted to make her look bad. And and what better way to make her look bad than just focusing on her sleeping her way to the top, if you will. And I think, and the rest of the book talks about perhaps in a broader cultural context, in kind of the war between the sexes context. For the last 2,000 years, women have not really been seen as equal to men. And even today, women make on average 85% of their male peers for the exact same work. So I think it's not surprising, given culturally where we're at in that war between the sexes, that Cleopatra is only seen as a beautiful woman who slept with two of the most powerful men. In her own right, like you said, she ruled the most powerful and wealthiest kingdom at the time. So right. there's so much about her that is completely fascinating.
Right. What do you personally find the most fascinating aspect about Cleopatra?
Oh gosh, where do we start? Her country, Egypt, at the time, so this is 30 BC, so 30 years before Christ. At the time, Egypt was the most technologically and wealthiest country in the world. They had things like coin-operated machines.
Right.
Think about that for a second. 2,000 years ago, they had coin-operated machines. They had like conveyor belts that were automatic. She ruled the army. She ruled the navy. She spoke probably 9 languages. She was the first Ptolemy Greek ruler of Egypt to speak Egyptian. She was involved in, she was, what we would classically consider to be a queen. She wasn't just a regent. She wasn't just in name only. She rolled up her sleeves and was involved in all the day-to-day operations of running a country, and she ran it well.
Right.
So
people did favor her subjects, right?
Yes, and her subjects loved her. I also really liked her as kind of a person, right? So So to prepare to write this book, I read a biography of her called A Life, written by a woman named Stacy Schiff. And if anybody is, interested in the actual in a biography of Cleopatra, I would recommend that. But she was a prankster. So she was a jokester. She and Mark Antony used to leave the palace and they would disguise themselves, right? So they would put on wigs, and they would leave their bodyguards, leave the paparazzi, and they would just go, have a beer, wander the streets of Alexandria, which must have been just a beautiful, gorgeous city. I think it was, like the New York City of its time. It was just, the jewel of the entire world, in terms of, its temples, its museums. It was just a gorgeous, gorgeous town. The main street, I want to say, was wide enough for like 8 chariots abreast. So a huge main. So can you imagine, these parades that they must have had with these chariots? Yeah. So she was. It sounds like she was a lot of fun.
Right. Okay. So now, since we're talking about this thing about the ideas that people have had about Cleopatra, right, from the time of Augustus. So I'd like to ask you this thing about which you mentioned in your book, of course, the history of propaganda, right? How it's been used and over millennia. So do tell us a bit about the history. Of course, it's there in your book, but yeah, for the benefit of those watching this video, you can discuss a bit about that.
Well, absolutely, and it's quite relevant to our lives today. I was fascinated to learn that a big part of why historians think that she and Mark Antony lost the war, which culminated in a naval battle at a place called Actium, is because Octavian, the sworn enemy, used propaganda to get more soldiers than Mark Antony had, and he was distributing leaflets, he was putting up posters, he was making Mark Antony and Cleopatra look bad. He made blood ooze from their statues, and I was surprised to learn that this was not a new tactic. So 30 years before Christ, propaganda was not a new tactic. Historians actually think that Darius I in Persia, 500 years earlier than that, was using propaganda. Okay, so 500 years before Christ, people were using propaganda. So those are some of the earliest known uses. Then it seems like the world may not have used it quite as much. It was really militarized in the last couple of hundred years. So my research showed that it was used in the Revolutionary War here in the United States. It was also used in the original Civil War here in the United States. It was used very much in World War I and World War II. People dropped leaflets, as well as food behind enemy lines in both of those world wars. And unfortunately, it's really become, I think, the biggest war that each of us is living in today, no matter whether you're living in the United States or India. Having grown up with technology, I think technology is a little bit of a double-edged sword right now, because we can look up information about anything, anytime, anywhere on our phones, but that means that people are weaponizing information and trying to get us to believe things that they want us to believe. So I really see that, and it's not just one side or the other, on the political spectrum, and it's not just Russia or China, and it's in corporations as well, right? And you could think about advertising as a form of propaganda, right? Which means I'm guilty of it too, because I market my books. But I think there's a spectrum there, right? I think there's the, hey, you might like my book, it's about this, which is just like bringing it to your awareness, versus the other end of the spectrum, which is Cleopatra was a whore, right? And the daughter of Satan, right? So I think there's a big spectrum there. And I think that spreading lies and falsehoods is definitely on that end of the spectrum. And I think we've absolutely seen that and still see it today in presidential elections, in just our everyday life with the political parties. And I think it's up to each of us to make up our own minds and to be aware that a lot of what we're being bombarded with may not be true. Right. So it's up to each of us to figure out how to discern truth from lies.
Absolutely. So your book packs in a lot. It packs in history, there's science, there's adventure, then it talks of the ancient world, it talks of the contemporary world, and then the action is taking place across locations around the world. So what was your experience in writing a book of this kind, and what were the key challenges that you faced in producing this?
Yeah, that's another good question. I do notice that I tend to write complex thrillers, and I've thought about that, because it might be simpler to write more simple thrillers just from one point of view in one place. But those aren't the kind of books I like to read. And when I start thinking about a story, they're just not the kind of books I like to write either. So I do write books from multiple points of view, and typically in multiple locations. And usually the last couple of books that I've written have all had a historical component in them as well. And so that does present some challenges. There's a lot of research that needs to go into these books. I don't have a background in covert ops, so I've had to learn about that. I have traveled around the world and have visited most of the places in my books, and I've traveled enough to know if I haven't been able to visit a place, what to look for in terms of things to make it unique. So I really enjoy that type of research. And I also really like telling a story from multiple points of view, because I think it raises the stakes and raises the tension. If you know what the bad guy's thinking and what the bad guy's going to do, and you're really connecting with one of the good guys, and you want them to figure it out, right? Because you know what the bad guy's going to do. But that's a little bit of a challenge too, right? Getting into the head of these multiple characters. And so one of the things that I've started doing is just getting into the head of one character at a time, and then writing multiple chapters from that particular perspective, and then getting into the head of another character. And I usually have to get, I don't know, a little bit into the book before I can do that, just kind of get my groove going. But once I get in my groove, then I like to do that as a way to minimize the jumping back and forth. And then I'm able to kind of put in some connectors so that it feels a little more seamless as we go from one perspective to the other. But yeah, writing a big complex book like this requires a ton of research. For instance, one of the scenes is at a camel festival. In am I saying Bikaner?
Bikaner.
Beaconer. So it was really fun to research, the camel festival and the town, and what people do at the festival and what they wear and what it smells like. And that was so that's just an example of the types of research that I have to do. So there's almost always research for not quite every chapter, but as I change scenes, and the internet makes that type of research so much easier. I can't imagine trying to write an international thriller 50 years ago. That would have just been you would have had to have done just a ton of traveling.
Right. So you're bringing in all of your experiences as well, and that really shows. It's the way you're describing the amount of effort it requires. It's really, really commendable. Congratulations again on producing this book. And one thing that one of the elements that I found really disturbing in this book, and which is an important issue, since we're already talking about travel, that I think needs to be that people need to be alert about this issue about trafficking, right? And there's this threat when you are traveling internationally. There is this threat that women and children can face. So, do tell us a little about this threat of trafficking when traveling abroad, and how can women be safer?
Absolutely. So the story starts with we've got a husband and a wife. He's a special ops guy, and she's a CEO of a large company, and they've been fighting, and they're in Bari, Italy, and he gets called off to go figure out, to try to stop an assassination attempt. And so she goes out with the girls. They're at a wedding, this big Italian holiday. She goes out with the girls. They go have lunch, and then they go get a drink. And at the bar, the bartender puts some drugs in their drink at the behest of the bad guys who are also in the bar, and so the wife and their daughter get kidnapped by these people that it turns out are sex traffickers. And they get taken to their lair where they're going to be sold off. And this is, an incredibly disturbing, subject, because unfortunately it happens. It's not just fiction; it happens, and it even happens. It happens all over the world. There's stories of people, Americans might think, oh, that doesn't happen here, but Sacramento, which is about an hour from where I live, girls have been kidnapped from the mall. People pull up in a van, and they send other girls in to try to lure girls out. So I think that's the first point I want to make, is it's not just when traveling internationally. It can happen to anybody in their hometown. And it's also not just women. Unfortunately, it can also happen to men and young boys. It's predominantly women and girls, but it's not exclusively. And trafficking also isn't just sex. People are trafficked for a variety of reasons, including labor. I've read, a number of stories where, and this is, I think, perhaps more where men are kidnapped and they're used for labor. So I think the message for anybody, for men, women, younger, older, is that we need to just be careful when we're traveling, when we're out in public. Your mom probably told you to be aware of strangers and be wary of them. And this is why, right? Because sometimes strangers have nefarious intent. And so I think it's I've done a lot of traveling myself, and it's easy when you're in a new place, you're meeting new people. I always want to believe the best, that people are kind, and they're just trying to show you their country, and here, come to a party, well, where are you staying, da 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 da. We recently watched the movie Taken, and some people have compared Cleopatra's Vendetta to Taken because there's some overlap there. And in that movie, our hero's daughter is traveling. She's 17. They go to I think it's Paris, and they meet a guy at the airport, and he's like, "Hey, come to a party tonight. Where are you guys staying? Let me drop you off." Well, then they go and kidnap him, right? So I think the thing is to just be aware that this happens. Don't let it ruin your good time, but be smart. Don't tell people where you're staying unless you've gotten to know them. Don't let people buy you drinks. If you like to drink alcohol, watch the bartender take the cap off of a beer, or pour it directly. Watch as your drinks are being poured. Don't get so caught up in the frenzy of dancing and having a good time that you lose control of your drink. They're actually starting to put cups on, or lids on, drinks now, so that people can't just drop something in your drink. That's smart. Maybe you can bring your own cup that has a lid on it, so that you know what you're drinking. Maybe take some classes in self-defense, or carry some pepper spray, or there's things that you can do to protect yourself. You can also so my watch has a GPS tracker on it. You can communicate with your loved ones. There's things that, necklaces you can get, and little trackers that you can get, so that your loved ones know where you are. So it's an unfortunate reality of the world that we live in, that there's just a lot of people who would like to profit off the bodies of others, and those are some things that men and women can do to be more careful.
Right. Thanks, Avanti, for sharing these. And okay, so let's talk about the good aspect of travel. You are very passionate about traveling. It just shows in how you're talking as well. And so, what kind of trips do you enjoy the most? And very important question I'd like to ask you is, how has your traveling impacted your writing?
Yeah, I do love to travel. You picked right up on that. I've had the opportunity to travel all over Western and Eastern Europe, and including a lot of the places that are in Cleopatra's Vendetta. I got to see Bari, I got to see Rome, and there's also some settings in Greece. And when I traveled, we never had an issue. I did feel a little bit uncomfortable in Bari because at the time I was there were a lot of cat calls, a lot of men going, ooh, hoo, baby, baby, that sort of thing. But overall, it was a fantastic trip. I've also been to Canada a couple of times, Central America a few times, Mexico and Belize, Guatemala, and most of the people around the world are just wonderful, big-hearted people who will, share their bread with you on a train, who will invite you to dinner so that they can, tell you how wonderful Denmark is. I love seeing how people live differently around the world. I think, growing up in North America, getting out to see the variety of faiths that people have, the variety of architecture that exists around the world, the different belief systems that people have, whether they're faith-based or not, but just how people think, how people live. There are some places where people are grateful to have, a tin shack, and any roof over their head. There's places where people used to live in caves. So this variety of human experience just fascinates me, and it definitely plays out in my novels, because a lot of people are for a variety of reasons, they're working 9 to 5, they're raising children, or their health isn't great. Maybe they worked their whole life and now they retired and they wanted to travel and see the world, but now their health isn't great. So they can pick up a book and they can explore the world, for a few dollars, or they can listen to an audiobook and they can be transported to Egypt, to the site where they're trying to find Cleopatra's tomb. So I think it's as a reader, I love being transported to new places and being exposed to new ideas. And so I'm just trying to repay all the authors that I've read over my day and, pay it forward a little bit.
Have you been to India ever?
I would love to go to India, but I have not.
You must plan a visit to India. Not
I
that
think so.
my country, but it really is colorful. You'll see a lot of different kinds of interesting stuff here. Different types of monuments, different kinds of architecture, and a lot to explore in terms of natural beauty as well. So do plan a visit.
I would love to. I would love to. I have studied yoga for most of my life, and it would be a real treat to, go to the birthplace of such a fascinating spiritual discipline.
Right. So, what else do we look forward to you now after this book?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the next book in the VanOps series. So the first one, for people who want to read something that's out right now, could check out The Lost Power. That was the debut, and then it's followed by Souls to Shadows, and oh, look, I've got one of Doomsday Medallion as well. So there's 3 books in the VanOps series that people can check out right now, and I'm outlining the 4th in that series. And I'm also working on something that we'll see if I publish it. It's something it doesn't have the same adventure flavor. It's more of a classic thriller. So I'm about halfway through the writing of that one. It's one of those that my marketing self said, "Why are you writing this? This is too different." But my creative self said, "This is the story you need to write." So that's, I think, part of the artist's journey also, is to write what your muse is telling you to write. So that one's interesting. That one's about it's about forgiveness. And there's a lot of interpersonal conflict between the main characters. So that one is a little too soon to talk more about that. But I do love the VanOps characters. They're a lot of fun. And I haven't decided yet if I'm going to write another one. So Tim and Angie Stryker are the couple in Cleopatra's Vendetta, and again, my marketing self says, "Oh yeah, you should follow that one right up with something else featuring Tim and Angie and some other adventure." And I just I haven't thought of how to follow that one up with any sort of justice. It's so that one might just be a standalone jewel. I haven't decided, but so I'm writing. Yeah, just it takes a while to do all that research, and so we'll see what I publish next. I'm not sure.
Good luck to you for your plans. And anything else that you'd like to share?
Thank you for the good luck. I would like to share that for people who maybe just want to try out my work, the first 6 chapters of The Lost Power are available on my website. And because my name is a little bit hard to remember, people can go to vanops.net. That's vanops.net, and they can sign up for my newsletter and get the first 6 chapters of The Lost Power and see if it's something that they might like. When they sign up for my newsletter, they get all kinds of free stuff. Right now, I'm giving away a bunch of copies of Cleopatra's Vendetta, both on Goodreads and through a King Sumo giveaway. And I continually give things away. There's also a lot of deleted scenes that people will get, from my newsletter. So I would just like to mention that in case people want to check out my work.
Okay. Thank you so much, Avanti, once again for taking out the time for this interview. If you're watching this interview, do check out Avanti's website. I'm putting the link and the link she just mentioned, vanops.net, in the description box of the video, and I'll also add the Amazon links for all of her books. You can check them out. And I'll be adding the adding my review on Cleopatra's Vendetta on my book review blog, which is ronikavahi.blogspot.com, on the day of the book's release, which is the 15th of November 2022. So meanwhile, you can check out the other book reviews on my blog. And if you enjoyed watching this video, please do like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ronika. Have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you.